Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. Today we read about Peter's denial of Christ. And we see a progression of events that led to this denial and included this denial. And one of the first things that we see that happened with Peter that led him in this direction was that he was following Jesus at a distance. It says there in Luke 22:54, now having arrested him, that is Jesus, they led him away and brought him to the house of the high priest. But Peter was following at a distance. So they were leading Jesus away, and Peter's just kind of hanging back. He's not up there shoulder to shoulder with Jesus. He's not going to the trial with Jesus. He's just kind of hanging back, following at a distance, still following, but at a distance. And then that led to him being seeking after comfort. It says after he had followed at a distance, it continues and says, and after they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter was sitting among them. It's probably a cool spring evening. It's the middle of the night. It's probably pretty chilly. And Peter begins to comfort himself by this fire and sitting by the fire. So we can see he was following Jesus at a distance. Now he's sitting down around this fire, seeking the comfort, the warmth from the fire. But he finds himself in a company different than himself as far as their views. It can be assumed that the people that were around this fire weren't really followers of Jesus, given the conversations that he's going to have in a moment. And he finds himself mixed in with this crowd, seated there among them. And then we see him actually deny Christ. It says, and a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the firelight and looking intently at him, said, this man was with him too. But he denied it, saying, woman, I do not know him. And then a little later, another saw him and said, you are one of them too. But Peter said, man, I am not. And after about an hour had passed, another man began to insist, saying, certainly this man was with him too, for he also is a Galilean. But Peter said, man, I do not know what you are talking about. And it says, immediately while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. And so here he is. He had followed Jesus at a distance. He had seated himself around the fire, seeking comfort. He had gotten in the midst of the wrong crowd. They challenge him about who he is, and he denies Christ. And this becomes a tragic moment for Peter. As it continues on, it says, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had told him, before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and cried bitterly. So this ended in emotional turmoil for Peter. The gaze of the Savior pierced his heart, and he wept bitterly. And this progression that we see with Peter in denying Christ, following him at a distance, denying him, or seeking comfort, denying him, and then Christ's gaze that pierced his heart that caused him to weep bitterly. This is the same pathway that we might take too if we're not careful. Denying Christ may not be something that just happens out of nowhere. It could be that it really finds its source in us following Jesus at a distance. Not really passionate about the Lord, not fully devoted to the Lord, not connected to the Lord in communion with the Lord, but just kind of following at a distance. Maybe showing up to church every now and again, maybe saying a prayer here and there, wearing the name of Christian, but not really living the life of a devoted Christian, just kind of following Jesus at a distance. If I follow too closely to Jesus, it's going to mean suffering. It's going to mean hardship. So I want to still follow him and have the benefits of following him, but not have the hardship. And so I'm just going to follow him at a distance, we might say. Well, usually when we're following Jesus at a distance, it leads to us sitting down, and it leads us to not doing anything. And we just cease following Jesus altogether, just living for creaturely comfort and pleasure. We might even get mixed in with the wrong crowd. And before we know it, we're already down that path that leads us further and further away from Christ. And maybe someone will challenge us on that. Hey, aren't you a Christian? Didn't I see you at church a few months ago? Didn't you say you had become a believer? And that becomes a moment in which we either will make excuses and deny Jesus, or say, you know what, you're right. I should be following Christ better, and I should be following after him and going back the pathway of the cross and heading back. But oftentimes what the temptation is that we'll deny Christ, and that will lead us to deny that we even know him. Now, it may not be that we're even verbally saying it, but maybe just through our actions, we're denying Christ. But we have to understand that if we go down this pathway, eventually the rooster is going to crow. Eventually, things are going to come to a head, and the safety, the comfort, the company that we were seeking, all these different things that we thought were going to make us better off in the end, just end up piercing our hearts. As we think about Christ, as he gazes upon us, and we sense his presence once again, and we hear the rooster crowing in judgment against us and in condemnation against us for our lack of commitment, our hearts are pierced, our conscience is pricked, and we go out and weep bitterly. And all the things that we thought would work to our advantage become or work towards our disadvantage, and we end up heartbroken. So this ought to be a warning for us to say, you know what? Let me just nip it in the bud. From the get-go, I'm not going to follow Jesus at a distance. I'm going to follow closely to Jesus, shoulder to shoulder with Christ. Even if it means being crucified with him, even if it means suffering with him, even if it means being slandered and mocked with him, I'm still going to follow close to him, because that's the pathway to glory, and that's the pathway to true joy and happiness in the end. If I deny him now, it might get me a few more moments of safety and comfort and all these things, but I'll be sacrificing so much more when the rooster crows. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do a reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.